Welcome everybody, welcome to the Blauwe Zaal, welcome to Studierenralen, but most of all, welcome to this lecture. Attention, attention, we all want to focus on things that really matter to us, but that's not always easy in these times of the media-driven attention economy. So, how to deal with that? Today we are, amongst other things, going to discover what helps you to stay focused in this world full of distractions. We do this with our guest of today, Stefan van der Stighel, the Dutch attention expert and professor of cognitive psychology at Utrecht University and the principal researcher at the research group Attention Lab. Also attention for the following, this lecture is being recorded except for the Q&A, and you can see it afterwards on our YouTube channel. Also, this lecture is a bit longer than usual, so all the more we need you to stay focused. So please a warm welcome for Professor Stefan van der Stighel.
Hello everyone, thanks for being here. So I would actually want to start off by introducing Brian Cullinan. And Brian Cullinan, he works at 𝘳𝘬𝘳𝘬𝘠, and he had a very important job, very responsible job. He was namely responsible for handing out, at the Oscar award show, the right envelope to the right person who's going to announce the winner. And Brian was very, very proud of this job. It was Twitter time still, he was tweeting about it the whole time. Look, I'm heading towards the red carpet right now, and here is my suitcase with the envelopes. Oh, I'm backstage, and here is Emma Stone, she just won the award for Best Actress. At this particular moment in time, Brian makes a huge mistake. Some of you might remember, but this is what happened on stage.
And the Academy Award.
Brian handed out the wrong envelope. He knows.
For Best Picture.
This is the award for Best Actress. This was just has been announced. This is not Best Movie.
La La Land.
No, it wasn't La La Land. It was the wrong envelope. And the day after, PricewaterhouseCoopers sent out this huge apology message. This is never gonna happen again. We take full responsibility, blah, blah, American bullshit. And Brian is no longer responsible. He still works at PricewaterhouseCoopers, as far as I'm aware, but he's no longer responsible. And these tweets that I showed you can also not be shown anymore. They were taken away from the platform. The moral of the story is, I think such an easy job as handing out the right envelope at the right moment can go horribly wrong if you're doing something else at the same time. Do not multitask, even at a very simple task. Okay, let's develop that story a little bit further, because I've been mentioning a few terms, multitasking, but in order for me to explain multitasking, I need to explain you what is attention. So that is the topic of today, is attention and concentration and focus. They're all different terms, and let me try to explain to you what I mean with these terms. First, the word attention. Every day, every moment in time when our eyes are open, but this also holds for the other senses, when we are looking at the world, when we talk about the eyes, we receive a massive amount of information. Prikkels, as we call them in Dutch. Stimuli are projected on our retina, and our brain cannot process all of that information at once. Our brain has to select only the information that is selected for further processing can be enhanced and can be stored in memory. So you can think of attention as like a filter on incoming information, and that filter is called attention. That's a filter on the external world, but the same principles also apply to the internal world. So we have made here an environment in which you potentially cannot be distracted by information in the outside world, but I don't know what's going on in the inside world. So attention is a filter on the external world and the internal world. And everything that is not attended is ignored. I can talk whatever I want, but if you don't have your attentional filter allocated to what I say, and what I'm presenting on the screen, the information will be ignored. So who knows the story about this Coca-Cola commercial that was quickly shown, very, very shortly shown during a cinema performance, and the audience was not aware, they didn't see it consciously, they walked away, and when they were asked, what do you want to drink? They said they preferred to buy Coca-Cola because they were just presented with that word subliminally. Who knows that story? Yeah, never happened. Never happened. It was made up by someone, and it was actually made up by. He sells commercials, By the way, his company went bankrupt. So, and he thought, if I tell the story and say this is how you can influence someone's behavior and thoughts, it'll make me a rich guy. That didn't work. And there's actually no evidence. And a lot of illusionists, like Mindfuck, we have here in the Netherlands, they also tell the story, right? They do a trick and they say, oh, I could exactly predict what you were going to draw. How do you know? How did you know? Well, there was this poster. You walked past it. Oh, I didn't see it. Yeah, but still, it's subconsciously influenced your decision and your thoughts. That is not scientifically correct. Everything that is not attended is completely ignored. You don't need to worry about subliminal influences, that I'm now subliminally influencing your decisions and your thoughts. You've heard all these stories, I guess, but it's part of the replication crisis in psychology. When we repeat those experiments with the right amount of experimental power, we show that these effects are not there. Attention is crucial. If you're not attending to me right now, the information will be gone because it's never going to go to memory. But attention is rapid, fluid. When something suddenly appears in your environment, also internally, a thought, you're hungry, all of a sudden you feel pain, attention will automatically be allocated to that stimulus. So that means that when somebody now enters the door, your attention will all automatically go in that direction. That's called a distraction, right? So apparently in our brain, part of the brain is continuously scanning our environment for something new, something that wasn't there previously. And then, when it happens, attention will automatically allocate it to that location. And that is evolutionary, a very handy characteristic of the brain. Right? If somebody now walks in, it could potentially be threatening. So this is sort of a system that makes us alert to the environment. So that's called a distraction. But of course, the brain does not know whether this new thing is a tiger that runs in or a notification on your smartphone. Right? So, but that's the same mechanism. Distractions go automatically. So attention is a filter, internal, external, but it's easily allocated to a distraction. And therefore, it's complicated to keep your attention on something for a longer period of time. And that aspect is called concentration. Right? If you attend to something for a longer period of time, the filter on a piece of information, internally or externally, that is called concentration. So you could call concentration sustained attention. And it's complicated. It always has been, and perhaps it's more complicated than ever. We'll talk more about that later. But I think even 30 or 40 years ago, when I was in my classroom, it was also complicated for me to focus. Right? Because as something appears in your environment, internally, externally, it's difficult to suppress because that's an automatic reflex. If we are able to concentrate less than 20 or 30 years ago, that's a problem. It's a problem for science. It's a problem for art. But it's also a problem, I think, in any workplace. But it's also a problem for learning. Because we know that learning is enhanced during periods of focus. That's not very surprising, I know. But it's nice to see the brain areas actually associated with that, right? We see that the brain areas associated with learning, like the hippocampus. Hippocampus is responsible for storing information in memory. The hippocampus is less active during periods of distraction compared to periods of full focus. So concentration is important, and we should think about how we can still concentrate in an environment that is now full of all these automatic reflections. And distractions, right? If we go outside, the battle for our attention is fierce. There's a competition for our attention. But of course, right, these companies know what I just told you, that you can only transfer information when you grab someone's attention. So, especially in a world that is more full of advertisement and all type of other messages that need to be conveyed, you want to be the winner. And I think we overestimate our attention a little bit because we can only attend to one thing at a time. And we know a lot of traffic accidents are actually caused by people not paying attention to the right information. And of course, this also plays a role in education. This picture went viral, although later we found out that these kids were actually making a school assignment about the nachtwacht on their phone. But were they? Or were they supposed to do the school assignment at that time? And perhaps at the same time they were now following Instagram. Because, yeah, let's talk about smartphone. This is an old one, I know, but there are just a few things I want to note about smartphone because they might help you in your own interaction with smartphone, things that I wasn't fully aware of. So, first of all, a colleague of mine does very interesting research. What he does, he replaces the icons with his own icon, but it looks similar. So he removes the Instagram icon of a participant. Participant is fully aware of this. Replaces the icon with his own icon, which looks similar to the icon that was removed. So now when you press the icon, Instagram doesn't open, but he gets a signal that you pressed it. But nothing else happens. And now he can see how long it takes for you to stop hitting that icon. Days. So even though you know Instagram will not open, you keep on pressing it. It's like a habit. And habits are automatic. It's just what you do. When you grab your phone, this is what you do. You don't consciously think about it. Right? Not all of our behavior is conscious. I guess everybody in the room brushed their teeth this morning, although I'm smelling nothing weird, so I'm assuming for now that it's true. But nobody thought this morning, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to brush my teeth. Like, it was something that you just do. It's part of your rhythm, it's part of your habit. And a lot of our behavior is therefore not completely conscious, free will, so to say, but it's just something you do. And a lot of our behavior that we perform on our smartphone is habitual. This means that you can actually change these habits, right? If you move your icons around frequently, if you put them on a separate page that you really need to scroll to, after a while that becomes a habit again. But in the first moment, you will notice that this habitual behavior will change. And I've noticed that myself, that this is actually something you can do to gain a little bit more control. Because again, part of the behavior that you perform on your smartphone is not something you can control, and it's not really your fault when you have to log in on a university system, and without thinking about it, you're already pressing the Instagram icon. It's just how our brain works, because we don't want to free up all the resources that every decision we make is very conscious. That will take way too much energy. Second thing I want to tell you about is notifications. And people always tell me, yeah, these notifications, they distract me. It's true, when I'm on my phone and beep, beep, something pops up that will capture my attention. But it's not only the sound itself, it's the association. And getting a notification creates something that I've started to term mental itch. And what is a mental itch? You probably recognize it. You know now that you have an incoming message, and it becomes very difficult to not look at it. And we also see that in the lab. Right? Colleagues of mine have done research where a participant was doing a complicated task on a lab computer, and with their phone next to them. Normally that's not allowed, but for this experiment we allowed it. We said it was actually required, your smartphone should be next to you. And without knowing of the participant, we send them a message, experimenter. Not we, so our colleagues, but experimenters send them a message. And we could look at the performance drop at that moment in time. And we saw the performance dropped, but not only for a short period of time, but for a prolonged period. So that means that knowing that you have a message right now will make that part of your brain is now going to be occupied with the thoughts, what is it? Who is it? Something going on at home? Is it a colleague that I met yesterday, the student that I like a lot? Like, you don't know. And that is something you can, I think, also knowing in literature, that's something you cannot control. Our brain is our learning mechanisms, right? We're really fond of new information. I don't like claims like every new message gives you a dopamine shot, because it's not true, right? Dopamine is very complicated. But people say these things on stage quite easily. I don't like those claims, because I think they're scientifically not fully correct. But I think I can say that new information is considered a reward. And our brain loves new information because of that, right? We want to learn. And knowing that you have new information it's from your personal network, I think it's just very complicated not to control. Even I, when I'm driving and I have my smartphone somewhere hidden, and I know and I hear it, at a traffic sign, I get it. I pick it up and I look at it because I'm just too curious. So think about these notifications, how you design your phone. There are many things you can do. Actually, I talk to these tech companies quite a lot. And this is what they tell me. Hey, it's not our fault. We give the consumer many tools to control their own behavior. Right? You can stop scrolling automatically. You can have a lock on your phone. You can make it such that you can make your phone black and white. We have developed all these tools. So it's not our fault that our consumers are so addictive, but because we have all the tools available, they just won't use them. Part of that argument is correct. It's very easy to change your phone in such a way. First of all, do not install social media, but even if you have it, there are many ways you can actually do to control your behavior. So many people are unaware of this. So spread the word. You're young, so a lot of you can know about these things, but it's surprising when you talk to older generations how unaware they are that they can actually control how their phone looks and makes it less attractive and less addictive. I'm using the word addictive this way, because there's quite a debate about whether you can call phone an addiction, social media an addiction. Some addiction experts say, no, an addiction is only like a substance use. It's really when you take a substance, that's what you call an addiction. And anything else cannot be an addiction, okay? But then gaming is also not an addiction. But if you can call gaming an addiction, then I think social media use for many of us is also addictive. Okay, luckily we know better than ever how it works in the brain. And my hope is that if I tell you how these things work in the brain, you can actually take that knowledge with you and perhaps improve your concentration span. According to Wikipedia, we now have a concentration span that is less of a goldfish. That's in Wikipedia, so it's correct, right? So the goldfish can focus for 9 seconds, and the human brain in 2013 was only able to concentrate for 8 seconds. It's on Wikipedia, so it's true. No, you already noticed from my voice that I'm totally not convinced by this data. Let me explain you why. The most difficult, well, perhaps actually simple question you can ask me, are we able to focus less than 20 or 30 years ago? Our concentration span, has it decreased? And the only fair answer I can give you is, I don't know. There's no scientific evidence to back up this claim. It doesn't mean it's not true. Let me be very clear. Some things we cannot prove or demonstrate with science. This is a moment in time where I'll start disappointing you, because you're like, that should be an easy question. Just measure someone's attention, and you look at how well people could focus 30 years ago, and then you compare that. Now, first of all, we don't have that data set, so we cannot go back in time. That's not possible. Second of all, I don't think the concentration span exists as a unitary phenomenon. I compare focus and concentration like a muscle. Why a muscle? If you train your arms, your legs do not get stronger. So I talk to young people, and they say, sir, I cannot focus. I said, in Minecraft? Hours, sir. I said, but in effect, that's also concentration. Yeah, but that's not what I mean. Okay, you mean probably you cannot read a book for a very long time. Yeah, that's what I mean. But some people can watch Netflix series for hours. In a sense, it's also focus, right? Concentrating for something for a longer period of time without distractions. But it's a different type of focus. So meaning that deconcentration span does not exist. But it's such an easy story, right? There are many popular science books. Last year, 𝘰𝘕𝘬𝘳𝘳𝘳, he wrote a book, and on the back it said that the American teenager can only concentrate for 19 seconds. But then you look at the data, where does it come from? And he gets it from like YouTube, so one sort of YouTube data collecting. Yeah, our experience on YouTube and how long we watch movies there is, of course, completely something else than like a lecture hall like this. So this 8 seconds, where does it come from? You might wonder, well, because it's on Wikipedia. Microsoft Canada, they had it in a press release. Somebody wrote it in a popular science book, and everybody thinks it's correct. It's called whitewashing of knowledge, as I call it. As long as somebody writes it up in a book, people start then referencing the book without actually looking at where the data comes from. So because there are way too many factors that are going to influence this, so you cannot say deconcentration span. So for instance, what if I told you that I just won the lottery this morning? Didn't happen, sorry, for myself mostly. But then I tell you that I find it's very important that you pay attention, and I'm going to quiz you all individually after this lecture, and when you have the answer correct, I'm going to give you 1,000 euros. What's going to happen to your concentration? You're going to write everything down, you're going to put off your smartphone, because you can now make 1,000 euros in half an hour. So, right, so motivation is crucial. My son tells me I cannot focus on my German, high school German. I said, sure you can. Go upstairs, learn for 20 minutes. I'll quiz you afterwards. And if I think you've done it correctly, I'll give you 50 euros. Yeah, then I can focus. Yeah, sure. What's going on? But there is something going on, right? I'm not telling you, again, this is not true. I talk to teachers, high school teachers, and they all tell me the same thing. You can talk to me whatever you want, but I know for sure something has changed in my classroom. And every high school teacher tells me this. An assignment that was previously possible to do for 20 minutes, I can now only do for 7 minutes maximum. Those types of claims I get. And then these teenagers around me can no longer focus, and their mind starts to wander, and okay. So I'm not telling you that if science cannot tell you something, it's not scientifically correct. But of course, I do have to explain what science tells us. Specifically, those exact numbers are not true. Something else might be going on, though. So when my son, 15 years old, focuses on his German for half an hour, that has consequences. And I think many of us, including him, are not willing to take the consequences of focusing. When you focus on this lecture, and thank you for being here, I truly appreciate it, it means that by now you are missing out on plenty of emails, perhaps. Your favorite TikToker, if you have it, has now posted four new videos, and on Instagram you probably have 6 new incoming messages. So the consequences of attending means that you're missing out a lot of information. When my son focuses on his German for half an hour, he misses out a lot. And I think many of us are not willing to take the consequences of focusing. I think we can still focus with the right motivation, in the right setting. You can still focus, but many of us do not want to take the consequences. This is a little bit of my own interpretation. This is not a scientific claim. But of course I thought about this because I understand what society tells me. Something's going on. But the fact that I cannot capture it in numbers doesn't mean that I cannot try to explain what is going on in the outside world. Science only has limits, especially psychology. Every brain is different. Like a claim like, if somebody approaches me, people approach me, they say, how long can I focus? I don't know your brain. I don't know how motivated you are. I don't know how well you slept. Like, it's quite complicated. How long should I focus before taking a break? How long should this break be? It would be great if psychology could give you those numbers, but we can't. And any person who does, please question this person, because it's not based on science, because every brain is different. What I can tell you is how working memory works, because this is something that works similarly in every one of us. And perhaps you can learn something from that, I hope. So working memory is the part of the brain that is responsible for executing complicated actions, cognitive operations. So like things like reading, listening, learning, doing a math exercise in your head, those all requires working memory. But not everything taxes working memory. Things like walking, motor actions that you do frequently. Some students can knit and listen to me. But they do this automatically, they don't have to think about it. So it's something they do, but they don't require any working memory because they have a lot of training. When I knit, I really have to think about this and I cannot listen anymore because, wow, this is work. But some people are very experts and they can do this. Some people can play the piano perfectly, can have a conversation. So not all tasks require working memory, but things like learning and reading and listening and writing, those are cognitive operations. They're not motor actions only. And it means that however, how frequently you do them, they will always require working memory. Only motor actions like walking, biking, brushing your teeth, those things can actually become automatic after a while, but the rest will tax working memory. But working memory can only perform one task at a time. The working memory in a computer is the same in how our brain works. The traditional processor can only perform one task at a time, just like us. Second of all, it's quite fluid, right? When something happens in your environment, it will automatically stop what you're doing, your working memory. So it's not the case that if something is in your working memory when you're performing a task, it will mean that the task will stay there. If something changes in your environment, you stop doing what you're doing. So you can compare working memory to a workbench where there are tools to perform a specific task. And when you now have to do another task that requires working memory, you have to get the tools off the workbench and you have to get the new tools on the workbench. This takes time. Every time you switch from one task to the other, it takes time. You're more prone to make errors because there might be tools left that you were using in your previous task that are still interfering with your current task. And it's cognitively tiring, right? Every time switching between tasks requires cleaning up the workbench and making a new workbench, designing a new workbench. That's a cognitive operation. By the way, if you think about it, where is this in the brain? This is the working memory. This is the prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex is like the director of the brain. What the prefrontal cortex does, it directs the orchestra, and it says to certain brain areas, shut up, because you're not involved in this task. And for instance, while you're listening, the orchestra has to play the instruments that require listening. So the brain areas that require listening, that are involved in listening, they have to be active. But then when you have to change tasks, those brain areas that were active, they need to be inhibited, and the other brain areas need to be activated. And when you're young, the prefrontal cortex, so the director isn't strong enough. In ADHD, same thing. It's still developing. When you're young, it's still developing. But ADHD, for instance, is associated with a less strong director, which means that the orchestra is not playing in synchrony that well. Okay, so this is the prefrontal cortex. Takes time to develop, but good news for many of you, when you're 21 or 24, it's at its best. Bad news for some of you, when it's 35, it starts decreasing, but that's a very slow process, but it is happening. And the time differs between individuals, but these are the rough averages. So, Brian Cullinan, you cannot perform two things at the same time that both require working memory. What you're doing is you're switching between tasks, and you have these switch costs, it's tiring, and you make a lot of errors. So we know the people that have been multitasking frequently during the day, they have had experienced higher stress levels. By the way, males and females are just as poor in multitasking. That's also one of those stories that are out there that is not true, that I can easily say is not backed up by science. Where all of us are not very good in multitasking. There are individual differences. Some people are better at switching than others, but we all have these switch costs. This does not mean that I cannot walk and talk at the same time. Actually, that is something I prefer. You already noticed this, that I'm moving the whole time. That is hopefully not disturbing to you, but I need it. When you ask me to give a talk here, because I'm on video, right? Okay, now please stand still here for 50 minutes. It sucks. I have the better job of all of us here today because I'm allowed to move. You are required to sit down, and that is something I don't like. Some of you might already feel the motor. Yeah, you want to move, right? Who's playing with something in his hands right now? What are you doing? Yeah, piece of paper. Yeah. I'm always destroying gums. Had these erasers, or I'm having a fidget toy in my hands. I need to move. I went running this morning. The reason why I went running was for you. Also for myself, of course. But because I know that if I run, then I get some of the motor energy out of my body. When I wake up, I just wake up with a lot of energy in my body, and I need to. So children with ADHD can only focus optimally when they are allowed to move. And it's not multitasking. Actually, when you ask someone with ADHD to sit still and listen, you're asking someone something that is not possible, because it's multitasking. And it's weird if you don't have this, but some of you might relate to this. Sitting still and then listening is both things require attention. I need to sit still, because else the teacher will be angry at me. And now I can no longer listen. A lot of our schools are, of course, designed to sit still and listen. And you also now see developments where at high schools there's a lot more moving going on, simply because it will allow a subset of the students at high schools to actually start performing. And what's also what teachers tell me. Kids that are normally quiet and difficult to focus, when I do a poster presentation, they become the leaders. They stand up, they start drawing, finally I'm allowed to move now. Now I can focus on what I need to do for a longer period of time. So this neurodiversity, I think, is very important to take into account. And this is one of my own eye-openers of doing the research of how I work. During the COVID times, I had to do a lot of online meetings, and it killed me. And I saw some of my colleagues, and I looked at them, and they were sitting so still. And I thought, are they still alive? And I was destroying everything around me, because then I had to sit still. And now when I do an online meeting, I put my headset on, and I go walking. And I can listen for hours. I can talk for hours when I'm allowed to move. When I'm required to sit still, I simply cannot do it. I fall asleep. I become highly irritated. I'm not a nice guy when you require me to sit still and listen. Okay, so these are individual differences, highly important, I think, to take into account. Also for some of you, think about also when you do work group, when you're working together with students, brains work differently. And we all have different situations in which we are able to focus optimally. So we are easily distracted. Something can appear in your environment and you're distracted, and a lot of us have to work in open office spaces. I hope this is not your future, students, because many of us adults that work, that are done with college and now go outside, and they have to work in these open office spaces, and it's horrible, right? I give talks in companies, and I show this picture, and some employees start crying. I am not joking. Because this is what they have to experience the whole day. And there are individual differences in how strong a stimulus should be for it to capture attention. Some of you might have great focus, that you can read a book here outside, People are talking, there are many people walking in. You can do this. Actually, some people enjoy it. Some people enjoy when there's some information around them, even when it's potentially distracting for someone else. But these people, they are sitting in these open office spaces, and when somebody starts talking, boof, they're automatically distracted. When somebody's typing, they're automatically distracted. There are individual differences in the threshold. These are just evolutionary point of view. We need everyone. Some people are easily distracted. They keep looking around a little bit. They keep us safe. Some people have high focus. They need very strong input for them to be distracted. And yeah, this is just a mixture that we have in our society. Science shows that people that work in open office spaces are sick earlier, and when they're sick longer compared to fair periods people that are allowed to work in an isolated environment where there are no distractions. And this makes sense, right? Everything I told you just now. Multitasking is not a good idea. It takes time for you to switch from one task to the other. There are individual differences, which means that open office spaces are not a good idea. I think for everyone they're not a good idea, but for some people they're more dangerous than for others, so to say. But it is possible. I'm not saying open office spaces are not possible, because a lot of students like to work in university libraries. In essence, that's also an open office space, but the very strict rules in these libraries, right? Actually, did you know that, at least for the Utrecht, it's not a rule that you should be quiet in a university library. It's just something that students do, and it's good. But it's kind of weird that it's not an official rule. Perhaps it's the same thing here in Eindhoven. But it's there's a very strict rule implicit rule that you should not do, right? Try to have a phone conversation in a university library, you won't survive, right? People will start complaining, and as correct. So there are strict rules that are applied, and the environment is developed in such a way, many books, that you can actually have less of the visual competition, right? A lot of less distractions, and this is what goes wrong in many of these open office spaces. So I'm invited sometimes to go to these open office spaces and give tips and tricks. They're relatively simple. You can have a lot of plans in there and design it such that it's less distracting. And second of all, you can design an environment in such a way, nudge it, that it actually is automatically clear what type of behavior you are supposed to perform there. So the university library, because of all the books, it automatically makes you quiet. For instance, the trains in the Netherlands, they have areas where you're not allowed to make noise, quiet zones, but they don't work. The reason why they don't work is the environment is the same compared to the areas of the train where you are allowed to talk. So you walk in, you sit down, and there's nothing that triggers you that this is a location where you should be quiet. Suppose that you create a situation where this part of the train looks completely different. All of a sudden, you know, oh, I'm in a different area, and this is, my behavior should therefore also be different. So I went to a company that changed their open office space, that such part of that area looked like a university library. So you had to enter through a thick door, and there was carpet on the floor. And it worked. People already walked in, and then they already shh. So the environment, you can design your environment in such a way that it automatically triggers a type of behavior. That's called nudging. Nudging has bad reputation, but in this sense, it's a really good idea. Create an environment in such a way that it actually creates behavior that is suitable for that type of environment. Something actually I wanted to tell you, because when I study, I always have headphones on and listen to music. And some people tell me, well, that's multitasking, right? No, it's not. For me, it's not. Who prefers to work with music on while studying? Who cannot do that? 50-50. It's always 50-50. It's so cool. And you're all right. Nobody's incorrect. So I need music because quietness, I don't like it. First of all, when I don't have music on, there's a higher opportunity for me to be distracted. But if somebody starts talking next to me, yeah, of course that will trigger my attention. So when I have music on, it creates like a sort of wall of sound around me that allows information not to distract me. Second of all, it keeps me a little bit awake. I've told you that I need movement, but I also need stimuli around me that don't distract me. And music, especially when it's quite stable, like a DJ set or neoclassical music, there are no triggers that automatically capture attention. I don't listen to music in my own language for many reasons, but one of the reasons is actually this, that because if I listen to Dutch music, I'll automatically start listening to the lyrics. That doesn't happen with Icelandic music, because my Icelandic is not not so good anymore. So it depends. Certain music I associate with learning, and I'm sort of like a behaviorist. I condition myself when I hear certain music, I automatically start focusing, like Pavlov. That's what I hope. Some of you are, whenever I hear music, I start listening to it. I attend to it automatically. That's just something that happens to me. That's correct. Every brain is different, neurodiversity. But without 𝑡wo Unlimited, I would not be able to have my high school exams. So thank you, 𝑡wo Unlimited, for your beautiful music you made during the 90s. But and my parents didn't understand, but for me, I really needed it. So for some of you, it's not multitasking. So let me get it out of the way. And then, a lot of people, especially in the work environment, when they work from home, they say, I want to be connected the whole time. And I think that's a bad movement. Some people that work in these open office spaces and don't like it, they start working from home, and then they are still interacting with their colleagues the whole time. So for instance, a rule that you should take to your future work environment: WhatsApp is not for work, right? Try to create such an interaction that when you're not working, you're actually able to focus on the things that matter to you. And when you're working, you're also not distracted by all these notifications. There's so much to win in applying some of these simple rules and how you can gain higher focus in the work environment. Here's the music slide. So how can you improve your concentration? Well, again, the muscle. If you train your arms, your legs don't get stronger. And I think the same holds for focus. So sorry, but if you want to learn to read a book again, okay, pick up the book. There's nothing else you can do. It's truly that simple. It's the thing you want to train, and you will notice, like a muscle, that it takes some time to build up. I went to the air traffic control. Why? Because their job is so complicated, and I wanted to know what they do to focus. Well, first of all, they only work 2 times 2 hours a day. That's it. It's so complicated that what they have to do, and the consequences of a mistake are so huge, of course, that 2 times 2 hours is enough. And you know how difficult it is to actually get the role of air traffic controller, right? You have to be quite special in order to do this. But I asked them, when they come back from a holiday break, do they immediately start on a difficult task? No. When people have been away for a couple of weeks, they told me, you actually give them an easy entrance, and then slowly but gradually you notice that they're getting back into it. When you have to write a thesis, the first couple of writing sessions, you will notice that it's complicated, and you find difficult to focus. But if you keep on doing it, you will notice that your muscle power will go up and up. So that's why I think this is a nice analogy. So there's not one simple trick that I can tell you, like a training protocol, that I think the scientific evidence is good enough that it's good for concentration as a whole. For one exception, and that's mindfulness/meditation. Science has shown me quite convincingly, I read the literature, all the references are in the book, and I'm quite convinced by the data that is out there. It's not science, like it's not nature and science, right? You can say whatever you want about these studies, about the power, about the bias of inclusion, but still. If you look at the evidence out there, studies have shown quite convincing, 10,000 steps, thank you, okay, now I'm distracted. I hate my watch. Thank you. That concentration and mindfulness are good for your focus in general. The reason for this is relatively simple, at least how I interpret the data. So I'm going to throw this all on one pile now, so if there are any mindfulness, meditation experts, I apologize, but what I think is the basic explanation of this, what it is you attend to something internally, like breath, or heart rate, heartbeat, or something in the external world, you keep your attention there, and when you notice that your attention starts to wander, you notice that, and you bring your attention back. One could argue that that's concentration, but then boiled down to its bare essence. It makes you very aware of what it means to be distracted and that you have an opportunity to bring your attention back. Of course, not always. Some of you might have worries that disturb your concentration right now. Something you have to do tonight, something that happened this morning. I can talk whatever I want, I can be as engaging as possible, but I will not be able to keep your attention. But when you've got a good night's sleep, you had some caffeine, and now you notice, you're talking, you're listening to me, you're listening to what I'm saying, but you notice that your attention starts to wander, which you all have. You have the option to bring it back. And this is what mindfulness learns you, what it means to be distracted, and that you then can observe that and bring your attention back. And I think that is actually why it has many good purposes, I think. One of the other purposes that I think is also helpful in this essence is that you can also start observing your own distractions. So for instance, I have a huge, well, not huge, but quite a strong history with panic attacks. Nice giving talks. But I had many panic attacks before these types of events. But what then I noticed during mindfulness is my internal speech. So I was doing meditation and I noticed, oh, I have this talk in Eindhoven next week. Oh shit, there are going to be 400 people looking at me. And then I started talking to myself. And by identifying those voices and identifying those messages, those internal messages, I could then decide not to attend to those. And it's something I now try to do, right? I was sitting there before the lecture, and of course these thoughts pop up. What if I have a panic attack on stage? And what I then do is I notice it, but I don't pay too much attention to it, like also not like fully getting away from it, but welcoming it, saying, okay, this is what I do apparently. This is my internal speech, but I don't identify with it. And I start to attend other things, like how many lamps are there, or other things that might at least not attend to those voices in my head too much. Well, there's a lot of stuff going on. Just wanted to tell you that this is something that you deal with. Might be, at least from my perspective, the scientific evidence is quite convincing. Oh yeah, sleep. It's a bit of an open door, but I have to kick it in. It is the best predictor, one of the best predictors for your attention span the next day. This is something we can measure. We sleep less on average. And I think this partly has to do with the smartphone. And the studies have also shown that looking at your smartphone shortly before you sleep also results in less good quality sleep, and it takes longer for you to fall asleep. This has nothing to do with the blue light emitted by the screen, as a lot of people think. It's not really the blue light, it's sort of your arousal level, right? Your arousal level is simply too high. All these apps are designed in such a way that it makes you very aroused. And then it takes longer for you to actually go to the level of arousal where you should be, namely sleeping. So are you allowed to watch television? Well, it all depends on what it does to you in terms of your arousal, right? So a lot of people watch very comedy shows shortly before they fall asleep. They're very predictive. In that sense, they actually help you in falling asleep. So it depends on what it does to you. And then, periods offline. What happens when you're not focusing? And how interesting a book might be, we all had the experience that your eyes go over the text, but there's no information intake anymore, right? This is also something that is not possible. I supervise a lot of students, and they say, oh, I really have trouble focusing on my thesis, but my aunt has a little house in Drenthe, and I'm going to complete my thesis there in 2 weeks. And they come back, yeah, it was nice. But it wasn't really what I expected. Of course, but even in an optimal society, in an optimal environment, at the end of the day, our concentration is limited. And like my smartphone, 11 o'clock in the morning, you have to recharge the battery. And it's all has to do with the arousal curve. Too much stress, too aroused, too awake, you make errors. But also when you're under-aroused, when you're not motivated enough, you start to make errors. You become easily distracted. You go into levels of multitasking. And yeah, you also start to make errors. So you have to take a break, and ideally a break where you don't interact with technology, because here your attention still cannot fully recover. Studies have shown that taking a break in nature allows for concentration to regain its strength again. Even doesn't have to be like a forest, it can also be just an environment where you don't need to interact with your environment too much. People have shown that people are better able to focus after a break in these types of environments than after a busy city center. But of course, here your attention can still not regain its strength while you're not attending. You need those breaks where you actually don't interact with the world around you too much. And this is nice. This is from the book Daily Rituals, where you show that like how famous people spend their day. And of course, they didn't have children to take after because they were male. Sorry for the male bias here in the examples. But it's nice to look how they designed their environment, their daily rhythm. This is Darwin. He started off with a short walk, breakfast alone, and then very clearly defined blocks of focus interrupted with walks. Look, third walk of the day. So he took many short walks, and not with a podcast, always in nature, but just he, himself, perhaps sometimes a dog, but he just with his own thoughts, just seeing what happens in your brain. This is Tchaikovsky. He composed only 2 times 2 hours a day, but there was always a long walk after lunch. Of course, it was possible, right? I'm not telling we should all do this way, but we can let us have a little bit inspired by how these individuals spend their day. And he was Beethoven. Beethoven was special for many reasons, but he could compose for hours and hours and hours, but in the evening a long, vigorous walk. And he had pen and paper with him. I'll explain later why that potentially is. But look at what he did in the morning with his breakfast. He counted 60 beans, something I call an attention ritual, something you do to clear your working memory before you start a period of focus. Like a ritual, something you do before you start clearing your working memory. Because if you have to focus, your working memory should be empty. And this is also my tip for an exam. If you have an important exam and you're worried, write down your thoughts before you make the exam. Cognitive offloading. If you have something in your mind, but your mind needs to be focusing on something else, get it out of your memory and put it on an external memory. Studies have shown that when you're very, very stressed out for an exam, and you're required to write down your worries before you walk into the exam, you actually perform better than when you don't. This is science, so take that with you. Hopefully it will help you. It's what journaling is all about. But journaling sounds, but I think cognitive offloading is a better term, and journaling was actually inspired by the idea of cognitive offloading. Okay, so what happens in the brain when you're not focusing? This is brain imaging studies. You know MRI. MRI, you can visualize how the brain looks, but with fMRI, you can actually look at its function, the activity in certain brain areas during a specific task. And I think this is one of the most important discoveries in my field in the last 20, 30 years, was actually it was revealed that there was a network of brain areas that is active when you do nothing. This is weird, because we're psychologists, we're interested in behavior, but some colleagues of mine said, okay, to the participant, lie in the scanner, just lie in the scanner. Try to keep awake, try to be awake. And what they saw is a network of brain areas, and they coined it the default network or the default mode network. And that also, I think the term is quite clear, right? It's your default status. It's a network of brain areas that becomes active when you're not actively performing a task, when your working memory is empty. And this happens quite a lot, right? When you're walking away, when you go to the toilet after this talk, you are not actively having a task in your memory. Like your working memory, the workbench is not designed. And this happens to us a lot when we're brushing our teeth, when we're taking a shower, when you're on your bike to the university on your daily route. Yeah, you can do this automatically. What you see is that there are different brain areas involved with this default mode network than the brain areas involved in focusing. This means that there's little overlap. That if you're focusing, you don't activate the brain areas, the default mode network, and when you're in your default mode network, you're not actively engaging the brain areas associated with concentration and focus. So what happens when you're in your default mode network? Your mind starts to wander. You get something you call daydreaming, mind wandering, dagdromen in Dutch. I kind of like the word mind wandering because I think it's a good reflection of what it is. William James, the godfather of psychology in the US, called it the stream of consciousness, right? You might have me happening to you right now or a couple of minutes ago. You're sitting here physically, your eyes were open, directed at me, but your thoughts were somewhere else. PSV, when they're going to be the champion? Like, when are they going to, oh shit, I need to call someone. My holiday, is it planned? Oh, like you're a time traveler internally. You're physically here, but your mind starts to wander. We do this frequently. When we try to focus, but especially when we do things automatically. So from now on, when you notice that you're daydreaming, this is a sign that you are now in your default mode network. And being in your default mode network has a number of positive associations. First of all, this is something you might already noticed from the talk or picked up, it's good for your focus. So after periods of mind wandering, you're better able to focus, right? Because being in a default mode network allows your concentration network to regain its strength again. It's all the afvalstoffen, all the waste material, biological waste material can be cleared, like during sleep, because the brain areas are not active. So periods of mind wandering are good for your focus. Second thing is creativity. The best ideas arise when you take a shower. That's what people say. I don't know when it's the best ideas, that's difficult to prove, but you can clearly be creative when you're mind wandering. There's actually a theory, which I think can never be proven, that the creativity during mind wandering is of a different nature than the creativity during focus. It might be true, right? They're different brain areas. So it might be that the creativity you experience during mind wandering is different than during focus. Perhaps why artists frequently look for boredom or doing nothing for them to be creative. Good work. And yeah, this mind wandering is also important for this reflection, right? You reflect a little bit on your life. And that's perhaps the reason why we generally, this is, on average, are less happy during mind wandering than during focus. Studies have shown that during experience sampling, that you ask a participant, what are you doing frequently during the day? Yeah, mind wandering. How are you feeling? People, some of you might recognize this, I as well, that, like for instance now, I'm giving a talk. I feel great, right? It's okay. There might be a lot of things going on in my life, but I don't have the attention to focus on the stuff that ruins my life outside of this talk. Don't worry, it's okay. It's okay. But when I walk now to the train station afterwards, that's when these worries come back, right? Oh shit, I have to go home, deal with all the shit that's going on there. So that's, I think, why if you have the focus, you don't have that internal speech, and that's why people are, on average, a bit more happy when they're focusing compared to when they are doing nothing. That's also, I think, the reason why if people are standing in the line waiting at the supermarket, they pick up their phone, because now I'm no longer mind wandering, right? The thoughts are gone, and I automatically attend to this. So this, I think, is one of the reasons why we do that, for many reasons, but it's also to get rid of the mind wandering too much. Is there actually evidence backing this up? Yeah, they've done these experiments and they're wild, where they have a participant, student, all alone in a room, nothing else, except for a machine which allows them to give them a shock. On average, after 12 minutes, a student applied a shock. So the idea of the story was that we rather give ourselves a shock than being alone with our own thoughts. This was a Nature paper, by the way, and replicated many times. And I don't know what the exact interpretation should be, but this is the cutting the edge interpretation. And I think sometimes we recognize this as well. Okay. Our world has changed, but we have control over our own environment. And I want to skip this actually, because else I'm running out of time. I want to go to this slide. We are, the part of that previous, the moral was actually we also should attend to information around us, because we're so easily these days now triggered by fake news, but that's another part of the talk. I want to end with this. Evolution is of course not that quick that all of a sudden that we have a brain that is no longer able to concentrate, in essence. But our environment has changed. And that's something we can control, something we can think about as a society. As an individual, I cannot do it alone. As a parent, I cannot do it alone. I need the government to step in, to tell these social media companies that they should make their algorithms less predictive, to get rid of the like button, and to stop the endless scrolling that these algorithms apply us. So the government should step in, because some of the things I cannot prove, but doesn't mean they're not correct. And I'm worried. I'm worried about the concentration span of me, of my kids, of the world around us. Because if we lose attention, we lose something. It also gives you the opportunity to stand out, right? Because, see, you bought a ticket for a show, and you look at the stage, there's this artist, and this artist suddenly looks at you directly. It gives you a very special feeling, right? Why is that? Because now you're getting something that this person does not have all the resources. So it's a limited resource. So you're receiving something limited, and it's something special, because now if you are attended, if this person on stage attends to you, you know that you're being picked up and recognized and identified. And I think when you look at healthcare, you look at schools, you look at companies, you can distinguish yourself by being really attentive to your customer, to your friend, to your family, because it's complicated than ever. And giving something your attention is special. And I think that's something that I think we should very much be aware of. And I want to thank you also for attending. I had the impression that you were very attentive, so that's important to me, right? Because if I give a talk and I have the impression that you're not listening, it's a horrible feeling, right? When I'm on a phone and all of a sudden the other person is not confirming my speech anymore. Within a minute, I will ask them, are you still listening? Are you there? Is the line dead? And when the line is dead, it feels horrible, because how long have I been talking in an empty space? Because now my message has not come across. So I think this is something we should think about, and that we not end up like Brian Cullinan. Thank you very much.